we are going to do something a little bit different for this Time for Teachership episode. So in this episode, you're going to hear a behind the scenes of my fellow coach, Kara Pranikoff, and I co-creating and really thinking through an agenda for a PD series we are doing in conjunction with Eric Soto-Shed and our amazing administrative assistant, Gianna Martin. Shout out to the team for Investigating History's pilot of the grade 3 and 4 curriculum written by Educator. So we are very excited for this opportunity to work statewide with amazing, phenomenal teachers. And we are in this clip that you're going to hear discussing our day one agenda, where we really give folks an orientation to the curriculum and primarily the pedagogies behind great teaching and how it is embedded in this curriculum. So what you're going to hear is really just us diving into this section on the core principles that underlie the Investigating History curriculum: historical inquiry and investigation, historical empathy and human connections, civic engagement and current world relevance, and culturally affirming pedagogies. As you jump in, we're really thinking about a discussion-based activity that's going to last about 45 minutes, where we're focusing on primarily the last three principles. So historical empathy, human connection, civic engagement, current world relevance, and culturally affirming pedagogies. So you'll really hear us think through what exactly is happening in those 45 minutes. And we have, as we're starting, really a general question in mind, which is how can we heal? And we are thinking about texts that are not actually from the curriculum, but maybe for adult learners, using Stand from the Beginning for young people. So yes, adult learners, but also we like to use the young people text so people could use it in their classroom if they wanted, as well as an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States for young people. So that's kind of where we're at, and you're going to hear the rest. I'm excited for this. Here we go.
I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-creating curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go.
All right, so we have the discussion and general idea, but then to start with setting agreements, how do you want to give them a baseline assumption? Do you want them to co-create a baseline assumption?
We have an hour.
Yeah, I do think we could probably borrow from other times, but I was thinking if the reflection on the core principles is like 15 minutes, then we'd have 45 left for the actual discussion activity.
So I think the best case scenario is for us to co-construct a baseline assumption, because ultimately we want them to be able to do that in their classroom, right? We want to model that you want your kids involved in the co-creation of those agreements. So I feel like we want to do that here.
And I think maybe have one in mind just in case they're like, I don't even know what that means. Maybe we share a couple.
Yep. Okay, great.
I like the authors of the book that I learned that from. They said everyone deserves food, water, and shelter, or something like that was like a sample one.
Yeah.
So like, if we believe this, then how do we
proceed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And then are we taking the time from the 45 minutes to co-create agreements, which would probably take 25, 30 minutes out of that? Or do we want to?
I think we offer those 4. I also like the ones from, what is Belonging with Dignity. So I sometimes share both of those and say, is there anything that you have to add? Right. But
I'm not familiar with Belonging with Dignity. What are those? Do you know those off the top of your head?
Hold on, I'm going to pull it off because I can't do it off the top of my head.
I do love the title. It infers like a lot of the things that we regularly talk about. Belonging through a culture of dignity. Wow, I need to read it. Okay.
You know what? You've seen one of the, the visualization or the visual representation of integration where it's like colored dots, and then like full integration is everybody's got another So that comes from this book.
Got it. Okay. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, right. There's a little, which I
Who
didn't
wrote
realize
it?
until I read, like I'd seen that and actually used that before. And then I was like, oh, that's where it comes from. I'm not going to find them here, but I've used them in the past. I'll link them. I've got them
Okay.
in PowerPoint.
Perfect. Who
Yeah.
is the author of that book? I'm going to make sure I look it up.
Lloyd Cobb and John Crownapple.
Okay. Amazing.
It's a good one.
Okay. Perfect. So, okay. Awesome. And I think too, we can link, like a couple, I think I have a resource for how to co-create norms that we could just link it. Like if you're interested in doing this,
Yeah, yeah.
go explore this in your choice activity later or something,
Yes.
you know, we could, yeah.
Great. Great. I mean, and then because we've got this out, when we gather again at our whenever our next one is October, I think we can have a conversation about how are you using the agreements? Have you had to add agreements? Is there a time you've called them into discussion? Like how are those, how is it a living, breathing document in your classroom? So yeah, I think we should do that.
Amazing. I love that
Right?
idea.
Okay.
Because I do think there's a tendency, even for people who do this well, to just like, I'm done. And
Yeah.
it's static and we're never returning to it. We're never
Yeah.
using it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think when discussions go awry, it's so powerful to pull them out and talk to your kids about, you know, what happened here? And is there another agreement that we need so that X, Y, and Z doesn't happen again? Like, how are we going to caretake our community? Is there something that needs to be added?
I love that. I
Right.
also was just thinking, I don't know if the Belonging Through a Culture of Dignity has an accountability agreement, but I do think that was another thing I learned from this other book that was like, make sure one of the agreements is how do we hold each other accountable? So
I love that.
I mean, I like the one that's just like, if you number the agreements, you hold up the number of fingers that's being violated. So it's like, 2, point to the poster, whatever, something simple. We can
Yeah, that's
offer
great.
that if we're stuck.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that's great.
Okay. So the question, I don't know if we want to like wordsmith the question a little bit, or if it's just like, how can we heal from harm in general? But I'm wondering about the how we can heal. And maybe it's like a little bit more history specific because it is a history thing. Like,
Yeah.
how do we heal from like white settler colonialist influence on indigenous people and like
Yeah.
the enslavement of Africans? Like, I wonder if we just like put it all out there in the question, or how much is general, and then we kind of facilitate through the primary sources, like let those speak for themselves kind of, and then have teachers bring it up. Where do you lean on that?
So my instinct is to be really specific, because I feel like one of the growth edges of teachers in general is just like say the thing and say
Yeah.
the thing a
Yeah.
lot. And we're not used to saying the thing, right? We're not used to talking about, you know, the harm of white colonists. So necessarily. So I kind of feel like we front load it.
Okay. So how do we want to word it? I just kind of riffed
Yeah.
there, but how can we heal from like the impact of white settler colonialism on, is that, so let's maybe pause there. What's the language we want to use around, is it white settler colonialism? Is it like from the impact of colonization, imperialism? Trying to think of the language they use.
Colonization, because I think that that's the language that investigating history uses more than imperialism. The thing that I'm playing around with is, do we want to say, so if we're saying impact, do we want to say ongoing impact? Is it implied that the impact is ongoing? Do we want to say historical impact? Do we just want, or do we want that to come up in discussion? You know what I mean?
Yep. That one, that's such a good question. That one, my leaning, and I can be swayed, is to leave it as impact and then encourage people to bring it up. And if they don't, to actually highlight that in our reflection portion of like, you actually avoided any connections to the present. Interesting. Why were you avoiding? Like, like kind of digging into maybe using those 4 quadrants of like, we didn't actively avoid the question from a historical perspective, maybe, but we totally avoided the modern connections. I wonder, I don't know.
Great. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I just want to have our radar. It also dawns on me that in a conversation, I think one of the pieces of debrief has to be, what did we as facilitators do to nudge the conversation, but not take it over, introduce other ideas? And so I could imagine somebody making a comment about, you know, that impact being long ago or whatever the language is, and asking the question of, was the impact only in that thing? Or was it, you know, is that the only moment of impact, or whatever it might be? Like, I think we could play around with nudging.
Yep. I do love that idea, because I also, my brain is also starting to go to where, how do we, what protocol do we use? Like, how do we enable the discussion to flourish? And so sometimes if we choose, for example, Socratic seminar, I am very much like a sit back and let it happen, like encourage the students to ask each other questions. And in this case, adults to ask each other questions. And like, there is a moment where if the discussion is totally not fruitful or bringing in misinformation or something, like there could be a moment that we do interject. So that'll be really interesting to think about how all of this fits within the protocol itself too, that we just choose to use.
For sure. For sure. I also just logistically, I am curious about, so we've got a lot of people in one room. Or are we going to break up even into thirds? Like maybe a fellow doesn't necessarily lead this, but maybe we break up into thirds. And I think it would be interesting to record the conversation, even just with notes, and then see the similarities and differences in the three charts. Like, could we envision something like that?
Oh, I love that.
Right.
And just, if we have three, so I'm just thinking that's about what, 20, 22 per, that's a good chunk of people, but not overwhelming in terms of numbers. Maybe 25 max. I think that's comfortable. I mean, it's not everyone's probably going to speak in this time, but also that's real. Right?
Except like everybody, isn't it more than that? Isn't it 100 and oh no, it's yes, it is. It's like 125 people.
You're right. Okay. Right? So I'm wondering if we do 6, we do the pods with 6 groups, pods of about 25 each, to simulate the classroom size.
Yep.
But that we do still, do you think that's feasible to still do similarities and differences across, like if we use a protocol that's going to be, for example, collect and display, where the facilitator, or we could do more, but thinking for time's sake, the facilitator highlights some trends, puts it on a sticky note, brings it to the front of the room, and then we can kind of collect the sticky notes and organize them into larger trends quickly.
Yep. Yeah. I think we would have to do some front loading of organization and then the trends. I think we would have to. I guess we just have to make sure that the fellows are cool with that.
Yep. I also think if we do have a framework, so for example, maybe we reflect as a group before we do the reflection section individually or with partners, whatever, after. It's like, okay, we're reflecting as a group with whatever framework we're using. We're using the compass, the Courageous Conversation compass. Great. Like, what were the trends in our group based on the framework? Or if we're using the discussion quadrants, where did we fall? So maybe that's helpful to just pick the framework, or if it's 2 frameworks, to be really clear about how we're condensing the information shared in that reflection.
Yeah. My instinct is to use one framework.
Okay.
As a way in, because even in that, we'll start to get a sense of trends. And then there's a clear line of thinking for that reflection.
Yep.
Right. I do think it's hard to have a big conversation and then be metacognitive about it.
So hard.
Right. So like I always suggest to teachers, if you're doing it in the classroom, like be metacognitive the next day. You know what I mean? Like have a quick thumbs up, thumbs down. How do we do? But like really unpack the conversation the next day, because I think it's hard. I think it's hard for adults also.
So do you think that actually that reflection using the framework, like for example, we use the compass, that actually that does live in the reflection section after they have gotten out of the circle or whatever like space that they're in for conversation, and now they're back at their desk, they took 2 minutes to walk around and think, then we ask the question there and then share out.
And then I think we need a break. I think we could stay in the circle, but I do think we need to have the discussion and then have the circle close. I'm imagining a circle, but like have the circle close, take 5 minutes. You could come back to the circle and do the compass, or we could do it individually, like back in our regular place. But I think we do need a minute.
Perfect. Okay. And that way we could have like kind of we can identify what we're actually sharing out whole group, whether it's like fellows analysis of how the conversation went or like trends of ideas conceptually. Maybe they focus on like one thing, like each of us who's facilitating focuses on maybe content. And then the Courageous Conversations Compass is an individual reflection that's focused on experience, how I experience it, right? Because that's what that is.
Yes. Great. Okay. I love that. And then that's really clear, because also if we're modeling for teachers need to have clarity that students may or may not are going to have a emotional reaction, whatever that emotional reaction is. And we've got to have some kind of way as an educator to tune into that or provide space for that. Right. Like one thing that comes to mind is, in a classroom, you're in an intense conversation and about history or current events or whatever it is. And at some point in the conversation, like 7 kids are done.
Yep.
But 7 still need to talk. Like, how do you handle that? Because you have to acknowledge both things. You know what I mean?
Yep. So I'm just writing like, how can we as facilitators, and this is like a reflection question, I think, for everyone, not just us in the space, but we as the collective educators, provide space for learners to get support based on how they're experiencing the discussion.
Yep. Great.
Okay. I just want to make sure that aligns with what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think? Maybe we go to protocol now. So we have the 6 groups. What is the format for the discussion in terms of like, is it Socratic seminar style? Is it circle style? I also have in the back of my head this lingering question of, this is like a long-term like arc. I want to like get to all these things long-term, but I just want to kind of slot them depending on where they fit best. Okay. So my thought is there are several discussion protocols I have in my head. Some of them are great for, I'm opening the question. We're going to do human barometer, and you're going to just take a side of the room, and then you're going to talk in small groups and share out a couple, like way lower touch, way lower intensity. The experience is a little bit easier. We're not citing sources. Yeah. Circle is very like everyone is listened to. Everyone has the talking pieces in their hands. I often feel like that's like the personal connections come out best there. Like, here's my personal story or whatever. Sometimes I center text in those, sometimes I don't. And then Socratic feels very much like a cumulative end of the, unit. We have several texts to pull from. And because we're pulling from 2 texts, I'm wondering, like, I'm leaning a bit towards that, but I also value the other pieces. And I'm wondering if, because we're going to have them like, this is day 1, and the next day is day 2, and we're opening a unit. And so I'm wondering if one of those others, like, for example, if we did Socratic today, does circle or human barometer work as kind of a beginning of a unit? Like, that's a more common protocol for the beginning of the unit. And since we're unit centered, we launch in that way. I'm just, those are my thoughts. What do you think?
Oof. So my pedagogical instinct is always to do Socratic. Like it's there. And I also really think that, so at the beginning of 3rd grade or beginning of 4th grade, you might not be fully Socratic, but certainly in week 2, the teacher doesn't need to be calling on anyone. I can speak, somebody can put their thumbs up and I can call somebody out. Like, there's immediate ways to center students from the 2nd week of school. You know what I mean? Yep. Even if it's not fully Socratic. My concern is we've just met everybody. It's 11 o'clock in the morning and this is heavy. Is this too much? Do we we just like dump them in this?
Yep.
All of it's heavy and hard.
Yep.
So if I hold on to that and we know they're coming back, is there a way we look at the documents and whatever they are, right? I'm imagining some kind of visual document and 2 pieces of text. Do you want to say something?
No, I'm with you. Keep going.
Like, is there a way that we like look at the text? I have my own experience. I gather some ideas or some things that I might want to say in discussion. I turn and talk to the person next to me. There's like a very low level, like I'm in the work, but I'm not publicly in the work really big. And then we can go back the next day maybe and have a conversation, or like when people like, can we go back and have the larger discussion the next day?
Okay, I love this. I love this,
Okay.
love this. Yes. Let's
Go.
keep the same question
Yep.
day to day. And yes. So I'm with you, and I'm wondering I just wrote a bunch of things on our collective doc. So like one iteration of that could be just, simple turn and talk. One could be like, what did you call it? A museum walk earlier? I liked that.
Gallery walk, same thing.
Yeah. The human barometer I would envision is like, we do a entry level instead of it's how do we heal? Is it possible to heal? And so that's like the agree, disagree. And we start surfacing those ideas. Or it could be a circle, and we model like what we would do with students, where it's like, is it possible to heal from harm? And it's general. And it's like, okay, I'm thinking maybe about my relationship with my parents or my siblings, or like a personal thing. And it's like, how does healing happen? And so we take it from the personal to the content and model how that, I think there's a lot of options.
Yes. I love that.
Do you feel like you're gravitating towards one form over another?
So the top 2, if I like contextualize this first day and all of that, I kind of want to do turn and talk and human barometer. I think we could probably do that.
Yeah.
And we can have a more public ideas conversation discussion the next day.
Yep. I wonder, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What if we did human barometer and then sit down and turn and talk, or even in your groups, turn and talk?
Yep. Great. Okay. Great.
I love this because
I'm so excited.
It's so exciting because it's like really modeling, right? We did just meet you. You will meet your children and immediately dive into all of this content that is hard. And what is the way, like, sure, we set agreements. Sure, we, validate and comfort and do all the things that we do as teachers to build relationship with people. And like, we cannot expect, I don't like when people are like, this is a safe space. I have declared it. It is so. And it's like, no, you can't do like that kid's perception of safety is like not there yet. And so I get that we're basically doing that because we're like, okay, we've spent like 7 hours with you, and then tomorrow we're going there, but like, you're also adults and we're trying to model quickly. So I think that's fair.
I also want to make sure that we don't tell them we're coming back, because I also think there's a real strength in modeling the power of returning to documents after you've had a conversation and some separation. I'm a different person, right? Even if I've just talked to one person, I return to those documents in a different space. Also, we will have been thinking about those 4 core values for the rest of the day. So I'm entering those documents in a different place than I did the day before at 11. So I think the kids do that also. I think sometimes one of the challenges for educators is to look at a primary source and get it quickly and forget that there's layers, and you're talking to 8-year-olds and they haven't seen as many things. And I need to process what my classmate said. And it's great to come back to it, right? Or even the pedagogical practice of like, if there's a source that's really important, leave it up at your board and have it there for 2 weeks, whether or not you're talking about it. Like, kids are returning to it. And I think that we can model that also. That was a lot.
No, that was awesome. And I just want to clarify. So you were saying we would tell them that we're coming back to it day 2.
I wouldn't tell them.
You would not tell them. Okay. I think I'm missing that part. Why would?
Because why wouldn't I tell them?
Because I agree with everything you said in terms of like, we're in a different space and we need the time and reflection.
So I think I wouldn't tell them because I want them to be fully engaged in that experience. And I think the debrief the next day of like, we're coming back here. How is it different this time? Why would it be different? I don't want to know that I'm coming back. I don't know. Why am I having this sense? There's some kind of sense of I want to be my fullest self on day one and not wonder about why we're coming back or know that I'm coming back. I want to say the things that I need to say. And then I want a bit of the disequilibrium the next day when we say, okay, we're going to have a Socratic seminar. These things probably look familiar. Why might we talk about these things? Like I'm wanting the disequilibrium so that we can kind of construct why we would come back. But I can be veered. Like, what's the benefit of letting them know? Let me ask you that.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting to hear that. And so I am acknowledging that that is totally how a lot of people probably feel. It's like, I do want them to be their full selves. So a couple, one possibility that's like maybe together, maybe, I'm not sure. One idea was, okay, let them have the conversation. And then after the conversation, say like, we'll be returning tomorrow. Because this is why, because I usually will do this opener with the same question that happens for a month or 2 months, however long the unit is, to say like, I think it takes the pressure off from, I'm thinking of Matthew K, who talked about like, you can't just have one conversation on race, like, and that's it, right? That puts too much pressure on the students and the teacher to have the conversation. And so I wonder if some students might be like, well, if I don't have any other opportunity, I want to say all these things and I have to get it right and I have to be perfect. And there's so much pressure on this is the one time because maybe we've never talked about it in any other grade before. And this is like, I have things to say and, you know, whatever. Yes. And so I wonder if it is like, this is not the conversation. We will be back and we want you to be fully present in today. So we have no expectation of you pulling from any sort of documents at this moment.
Yes.
And then just kind of lower the pressure that way. I don't know if you feel like that checks the box though, or if that somehow takes away from the presence that you were describing.
No, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're agreeing that anything that's in the classroom, you want it to have its fullest life, right? We want teachers to know that it's important to go back to things that kids have seen, right? Especially if we're thinking about the inquiry cycle, we want students ultimately, we want students to say in the middle of a conversation, remember that map we talked about last week? Or like, I'm going to grab that map we talked about last week because it's relevant to this conversation, right? Yep. But I agree with you. And I remember that bit from Matthew K. I think you're right. It's not everything in this conversation. So let's let them know we're coming back.
And maybe, okay, and we can do that. Do you think the best place for that is after they have the conversations day one, like not prior or prior?
I think after they have the conversation day one, right?
Because I think that will be like, so we had the conversation. I think I'm like going back a little bit on what some of the reasons that I said, but I do think it still works because it's like someone may be sitting and like, but I had more to say, or I said that wrong, or like, actually, I would change my answer. And like that can be eliminated when we say, hey, and we're coming back tomorrow. Like more time.
Wait a second. Here's an idea. Okay. So something that I often do in the classroom when discussion is established, and I think you and I have talked about this, is in preparation for a conversation, we'll like decide on what the question is, whatever. And then I'll have kids write, like, what are my first ideas about this question? And then at the end of the conversation, like draw a line. Now I'm thinking whatever it is that I'm thinking, or now I'm wondering, or tomorrow when we come back, here's what I want to talk about. So I wonder if we introduce some kind of, in the reflection, some kind of like, where are you now? You know, like what's something that you're wondering after this conversation, or where's like the place that your head is, or is there something that a colleague said, like, you know, some kind of reflection on the conversation and how the conversation, even the turn and talk and barometer, push their own thinking about the documents. Could we do something like that?
I love that. And I actually, so the Socratic seminar template that I usually share, which credit to all of the people who like co-created this, they have a section, page 3 is to be completed in the last 5 minutes of a class or like a discussion. Like we've ended the discussion formally. And yeah, it's like, there's 3 questions. It's like, what, I think it's something like what ideas are remaining with you or kind of sticking with you? What, have you changed your mind, or how has your thinking evolved? And also a process question of how did we do with our community agreements? Like, would you add a new one? So we can use something like that, but like maybe tailor it down to 3rd grade as opposed to like, this was a high school created thing.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and I think that is like, now I'm thinking, right? Like what, or sometimes I use the language of, did your idea like grow or change?
Oh, I like it. Yeah. Grow or change.
It's the same. It's just 3rd grade language.
Yep.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
Awesome. I think that's good for the discussion part. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope you truly enjoyed that conversation between Kara and myself. I am so excited to learn and collaborate with folks. I am totally still growing in terms of making, for example, adult professional learning truly align to the experiences that I coach teachers to facilitate for their students. Sometimes when we're facilitating PD or when we're designing learning experiences in general, it's just really hard to take yourself out of the content you want to deliver and think really thoughtfully about the pedagogy. And so this conversation really stretched me. I highly encourage you to find a thought partner who's going to stretch you as well. So we plan learning experiences a ton, like way better when we have someone that we can bounce ideas off of. So to help you get some thought partnership, Kara and I are inviting you to 1 week on our Slack-based coaching platform, EduBoost, for free. It starts, if you're listening to this as soon as it airs, next week on Monday, August 12th, 2024. You can sign up at the blog post for this episode at lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/175. And if you're listening later on, don't worry, you can still head there, click on the form on the blog post, and you'll be entered into our waitlist. We will do these again in the future. We are dedicated to this coaching model, and we are so excited to work with you. If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no-strings-attached brainstorm call at lindsaybethlyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.